Ajay, over to you.
Hi, good afternoon. This is the new season of Welcome to the new season of Talk Retail once again, organized by TIE and 100 Watts. TIE, as you know, is an organization fostering entrepreneurship, especially the startup ecosystem. 100 Watts is completely dedicated to ventures from technology side in retail, working retail and consumer durables, consumers brands. And we work with these ventures to help them to scale up, get them funding. And that's what our mandate is we are supported by most of the community and most of the industry across the industry. And today's session is largely about how consumer engagement has been innovated during the pandemic. My name is Ajay Aggarwal. I head retail for 𝐂𝐮𝐬𝐭𝐨𝐞𝐫, as well as I work with 100 Watts as a managing partner. And we have been currently we're supporting around 13 ventures. And we are always looking for new ventures to come and reach out to us and see if they've got interesting ideas to work with the industry. As I said, today's session is largely about the innovations which is happening in the consumer engagement side from the retail brands. And we've got three very interesting colleagues to talk to us. We're very fortunate to have Uma with us. Uma has been a evangelist in a lot of digital initiatives across the retail brands like Raymonds, Shoppers Stop, and Trent. We have Rajiv Nair. Rajiv has been part of 𝐂𝐮𝐬𝐭𝐨𝐞𝐫 group for a long time. He's virtually built that brand right from the scratch. And we have James. James comes with very interesting background. James has been bringing very innovative entertainment formats, especially theater groups and circuses and a lot of entertainments. And he's doing some very interesting stuff, both in Europe as well as in Middle East. And we'll talk about that in detail. Thank you very much, all of you, for being with us. So let me start with a simple thing before we start, I want to tell all of you, please keep posting your questions in case you find anything interesting, posting on the chat. I'll try and cover whatever we can cover. And so what I wanted to start with, and let's keep this as a discussion, not as an interview. The idea is that just let's understand first, do you think that the pandemic has brought in some change in the behavior and the expectation of a consumer, the way they engage with the brands, from the point of view of what their expectation is, and how the consumer patterns have changed, how consumer behaviors have changed, how they're consuming the brands in a different way, not just online, offline, but also the social media is playing a very important role. So let me throw it open. Let me start with Uma. Uma, please kick off the discussion.
Sure. So Ajay, I think, if I use words like it's an unprecedented time, of course, that will be saying the least about it. That's hardly the way to start the discussion. But I think that there are certain trends that one sees which are quite interesting, especially from a marketing point of view. I think the first thing is that you see, and being in retail, what I've seen especially is that while consumers' expectations have changed and probably have become higher than before because there are other concerns which are there now in their lives from health and safety. But I think the two-way empathy is also very, very high. So I find that mostly consumers are also, while they're concerned for their own well-being, are also concerned for the well-being of staff and service providers on the other side. And how companies take care of their employees today is making a very big difference to their overall image and perception and how consumers see these brands. So I think that's the first very remarkable trend where you see two-way empathy, where everybody is interested in joint well-being because of the nature of the pandemic and the disease, and the empathy is at the highest. I think the second thing that is a very big outcome of this, of course, which we have seen, has been towards e-retailing and towards digital channels. So I think that's a very, very big trend, and it was already fast, but it is far more accelerated since COVID for very obvious reasons. But I think this again creates a lot of expectation around engagement, because the effect that physical environments had of experience, and I'm sure James would be facing that, because what you enjoy in that real life, right? How do you experience that same effect in the online life or the virtual life is a very, very big expectation. So how seamless your experience is, how consistent your experience is very important, but it need not be the same experience. So I find that how you translate your offline presence to online doesn't have to be a mirror, but how you evolve the same values, the same standards, the same ethos of service, the same kind of product experience becomes very, very important. And how you create that environment in the online space which makes people feel that they're shopping with the same brand, but is very much online friendly and is recognizing the need for innovation, which is much higher in case of online, today. I think therefore innovation, but keeping your brand, constant is the other piece, which I think is a very big thing. You mentioned social, of course. I think there has never been a larger impact on community. And if you see like the trend which is coming, whether it is social commerce or whether it is through influencers or whether it's even the transformation of the way loyalty programs will emerge, I think the whole community aspect is much larger and much more intimate than before, where consumers are looking for peer group endorsement, peer group togetherness, and they are looking for that validation, as well as how passions can come together, how hobbies and interests can come together at this point in time is the other third thing that I think is a very, very big trend that I've seen, is accelerated during the pandemic.
Yeah, Rajiv, welcome. What is your view? You come from a completely different category, which is absolutely, there is a high touch category you work with. And what is your view?
Ajay, I missed you a bit in the first instance because I couldn't actually get into the meeting. So if you could just, rephrase the question, I can probably get it because I missed the first 2-3 minutes.
How do you think that because of pandemic, how the experiences have changed across various categories? Have they really changed because of the consumer behavior or the nature of pandemic impact or various other factors, And that's why I asked this question specifically to you, because you're in a high touch category, where a pandemic played a very, very key role in impacting your way you engage with your customers,
Correct. No, I think the pandemic's kind of, turned around business models on its head over the last 1.5 years. And I think Uma and me come from physical retail verticals as well as online now. But I think the lack of physicality in our business impacts quite considerably, because we are not just in a commodity or product business. We are also in a service business where touch feel really matters and consumer engagement really matters. We actually experienced almost a 30 to 50% of consumers not coming into our businesses for almost 8 to 9 months, because it started off as low as 50% of the customers walking in and then maybe increased to about 70% later part of the year. So obviously there was a lack of emotional connect with the consumer for a large period of time, which also shaped new buying behaviors for customers. Like, for example, instead of going for skincare services, online actually replaced quite a bit of this demand. Strangely, so even services became online. Services started being delivered at home. So a lot of our product business is virtually about 30% of our business anyways was online, and new business models emerged where services to home became apparent and used a lot more by consumers. Earlier it was largely for handyman services and stuff like that, but now beauty salon services and actually doing laser hair removal, for example, a complex service like that being delivered at home using equipments and stuff actually happened. We also realized that consumers were not so receptive to the idea of being spoken about, consumption and purchases during this period, because there was so much of fear at the back of it, and almost fear of death in that sense for a large part of the consumer, saying the fact that if I go and interact with businesses, I am likely to contract the disease, and it's likely to impact my family as well. So that's the other thing that actually happened. So I would say we had to be cognizant of things like mental health and well-being of consumers at the same time of that of employees, because also, whether we like it or not, I think it also had an economic impact on consumers during this particular period. So for example, our services are premium services. This is discretionary in nature. So it is not like customer needs to really buy it. Otherwise, there are consequences to it. So unlike grocery, unlike some parts of retail, consumers also said that these are services that are postponable, something that can be done at a later date. We don't need to really, do. So I think the only thing that we did during that period, while our staff was sitting at home, we had about 30,000 calls to customers, actually just to inquire about their wellness and well-being. Okay, to some extent, if whether they've been impacted, there've been family members who've been impacted and stuff like that, and just build that level of connect. We also started doing things like web consultation during this period, where our doctors started saying the fact that we can proactively meet at no cost to customers. We did about 6,000 web consults in April, May of last year to reach out to customers saying, if you're having any concerns around skin and hair services that we are in, we are there to help you. We can give you alternative suggestions. We may not be able to provide you services, but we can provide you with prescriptions and others that you could go out and do. Last but not the least, while e-commerce did work for us during that period with partner ecosystem and D2C, we also said the fact that we could deliver some of our products home. So we started doing these localized deliveries and more like omni-commerce type businesses during that particular period, which actually happened. So I think broadly, these are the kind of trend changes that actually happened, and we had to adapt to those over the phase of the pandemic. Just to round that off, I think the second phase of the pandemic being so adverse is something that we probably did not predict. In fact, in India, for James's benefit, I think the second part was even more complicated than the first one. But I think we were all more prepared for it. We did realize the fact that there are going to be disruptions. Technologically, digitally, we were better prepared than what we were in the first part of the pandemic. So I think that's the journey that we're taking now for the future, is where I'd like to leave that. That's it.
James, thanks. James, you come from an entertainment where you're actually having a very high touch. Again, it's a very discretionary, spend. And during the pandemic, people were happy sitting at home watching Netflix and various other things. They really did not miss going to a theater so what has been your experience? Though I know you have been busy creating new centers and new formats. We'll talk about that later, but what has been your observations and experience?
Obviously, it's been a very sad time for many people, which I'm sure I speak for everybody. We will send everybody our thoughts and prayers who have gone through such dreadful times. And I think that's had a big impact on all of us, and indeed our customers and guests. However, what we found was that when the pandemic hit, we were working in Saudi Arabia and Riyadh, and we immediately thought, we naively thought, how can we keep trading with the theatres and cinemas and keep our customers safe? So we developed all sorts of concepts, which was really having theatres and cinemas in much more open spaces. Then, of course, everything got shut down, which meant for me, I came back to the United Kingdom, but still working on those ideas. We looked at a concept which we developed called block entertainment. And the best way to describe block is it's got a huge, big stage where we have live entertainment 7 days a week. Behind the stage is a big LED screen where we can show Netflix movie launches, sport and music, for example. And it's all open. We have built one now in Norwich, which has actually got a roof. But if you can imagine a huge, big warehouse type building, and in the building there is food and beverage, there is retail, and it's all encompassed by this live entertainment. Because what we found was that the longer the pandemic's been going on, the more there's a pent-up demand for people to experience live entertainment. And in that, I feel retail should be discussed as well, because I think a lot of people have had to shop online, and a lot of people who said they never would shop online now shop online. However, if you go right back to the beginnings of our civilizations, there's a human need, a human desire for social interactive connections. But people want to do that in a safe environment. And I think naturally they feel that if it's open outside and correctly laid out in terms of distancing, and it looks safe and secure because it is, then they're extremely excited to be involved. And we've been approached by 14 councils now in the United Kingdom to look at putting our block entertainment concept into as close to the city centres as possible, because the challenge all of the high streets have in England is that people don't want to come back. So most of our city centres are empty of customers. So the thought is if we can put something new into the city centre, a slightly different concept, which we have, then it will bring people back into the city, which will then have an incremental effect on all of the retailers and restaurants in the city. I'll say something controversial now, if I may, AJ. I thought, should I say this or shouldn't I? But I have to be honest, is that this is, apologies if anyone takes this the wrong way, it's not intended, but we found during the pandemic, it's actually thrown up opportunities which weren't there before. I say this carefully because I don't want to be rude, but in the United Kingdom, for example, the government have been so committed to getting the country back on its feet, finding jobs for people that have sadly lost their jobs, that there's a lot of government money around in terms of grants and loans, which for retailers such as ourselves and people involved in entertainment are there to be applied for. So I think for projects like some of the ones I've been working on, we've been able to tap into these grants and loans to help finance them, whereas 18 months ago, these financial facilities weren't available. So I think that's quite attractive. We've also been working on a cinema concept, which I can only describe as a luxury cinema. And the ideas come from our work in Saudi Arabia, where people obviously stopped going to cinemas. So what we've come up with an idea is creating a cinema, but within the cinema, 8 smaller cinemas. So you can literally have a cinema experience, book, and go with your family or a close group of friends in your social circle, in your bubble in terms of the pandemic, and enjoy a theatre experience. And the first one we're building in Riyadh now, which will open October the 16th. And we are looking at building one in London at the Olympic Park on the east side of London. So I think there's so much which has been going on. Things are developing all of the time. But I take on board what Rajiv was saying about listening to consumers, listening to guests. They always tell us loudly and clearly what they want, and then it's our responsibility to deliver that.
Mm. So before we come to the real examples, the friends, of what is new, which we have created, I was wondering that how much you think that the new formats and new innovation has been demanded or driven by the consumers themselves based on their, like as Rajiv mentioned, that they were scared, they were not willing to talk about it. And, so what is the kind of thing which are actually the ideas came from the consumers that this is the way we want to engage with your brand, otherwise we'll go somewhere else. I mean, do you think that you have experienced something like those?
Yes, most certainly. I think, I'll tell you what's interesting is, I'll go slightly off the subject here, is I was talking to my business partner, who's a gentleman called Paul Gregg, and Paul created the largest cinema and theatre group in the United Kingdom, which is now the Ambassador Theatre Group. And really what we've been working on over the last 18 months is 2 things, is markets, outdoor markets, but a modern format. And what I mean by that is a bit like what I've just described, the block entertainment concept. But there's a big fashion we've noticed in the Middle East and also here in the UK for like urban industrial, sort of big ironworks containers, graffiti on the wall, but graffiti sprayed by proper graffiti artists, if you're with me. And it's very sort of raw, basic, almost back to the basics. So outdoor markets selling fresh local food that's got a 0 carbon footprint, produced by local producers. Consumers love it because it's perceived as being fresh and healthy, and there's no traveling involved in it. And it's also people that have maybe never had their own company before, starting small businesses in retail with clothing and also with food, all sourced locally. And the second element of what we're doing so much is circus, which is one of the oldest forms of entertainment that there's ever been. Although of a remarkable history, circus introduced boxing to the world, for example, and many other such ideas, and theme parks. And we've got such an appetite for people to have our circus. It's quite incredible. Circus was sort of diminishing a little bit before the pandemic, but coming out of it, the demand's incredible.
So, 𝐂𝐮, you've been into a lot of digital, initiatives. As you also mentioned, what is the role of social media in driving new format, new ideas, and new way of engagements?
Yeah, I think the biggest pull that one saw during the pandemic. So while everybody had a strategy that was deployed for WhatsApp, but I think that was the biggest pull that one really saw for consumers, because there were a lot of people and customers who chose to WhatsApp staff directly and ask for questions or wanted to shop. So I think this has been an accelerated piece where, adoption of enterprise WhatsApp has tremendously gone up. I definitely think as, a virtue of a pull and the interest from consumers to use that channel because it was so easy, and then payment being integrated, into that. I think from a social perspective, video commerce, according to me, is a very big trend, which is again showing up. And I know that at, while we were at Shopper Stop, there were some experiments done with that where members did get on to a live video streaming event to actually shop, and then were also looking at what are the comments and queries from others. So that whole participation in a live event of this nature, in absence of now having fashion shows, etc., I think that advent of social commerce is going to take place into multiple ways. So I think that was the second one. And I think influencer-led commerce, again, is taking shape very, very differently with launch of influencer-led curated stores. So for example, at Shoppers, we did launch a set of stores which were directly led by influencers, right? So you could come, for example, if 𝐂𝐮 is running something, 𝐂𝐮 could say 𝐂𝐮, who is a regular customer, is now running her own store on 𝐂𝐮.com of products that she has used and she has endorsed because they have worked for her. So I think there is definitely, innovation which is taking place in a very different way from the typical social media that we have experienced so far, which was just, content being pushed out. I think integration of first-party data with social commerce is going to be a very, very big trend, which means that you have your base of customers. What do you understand of them? How much, data can you actually put together to bring different cohorts, together into that, and then feed them into social commerce, because then they can feel the experience which is much more meant for them as a segment, where there are other customers who have similar needs which they can learn from. I think it's definitely a big trend which will emerge in the future, and you see bits of it being tried all over the world, and initial success of that is very, very high compared to looking at other means. And this also gives you a better cost of acquisition and more lifetime value. So I think this is going to be an important piece to really put together well, make sure that your technology, your data, your resources are actually equipped to handle an event and handle social commerce like this.
Ajay, I'd just like to add to something that 𝐂𝐮 said. I think, along with products and services, content itself became something that people are consuming and for which there is value. In the past, it was largely advertising, which means it's like a top-down approach where brands want to just talk their story, wherein actually today users are creating content. It's not just the influencers, but users creating content about brands which have very high traction. In fact, some of the video quality, in fact, at some point we used to pay a premium for the quality of the video content, wherein actually it doesn't matter anymore. Anybody with a phone can either make your brand or can kill your brand. So actually during the pandemic, while people were spending a lot of time at home with their devices, with their computers and with their stuff, I think a lot of user-generated content, user-generated testimonials actually made brands, and sometimes in some cases broke the brands. Is what I would say even today, a lot of encouragement for this kind of content is being provided by brands like the Amazons of the world and also for Nykaa and other companies, which are also saying the fact that user-generated content is becoming extremely valuable and this thing. Secondly, I think during this period, I think consumers are looking for, in our kind of a brand, looking for some kind of an advice, which is not necessarily, as I said earlier also, it's not like a selling type of commentary. It is basically saying that I am sitting at home, I am facing a lot of problems. For example, we had a lot of acne problems during this period. We had a lot of hair loss problems during this period. And they were just looking for some content which would help them. So we actually did a lot of doctors meeting consumers online and actually content that we put out there, which was on these specific problem areas that they were. In fact, if you see that cosmetics, the entire focus moved towards the area that we are in, which is skin care. So customers are more concerned about what's happening to them rather than saying, I want to look good and I want to be a particular type. So I think in that sense, content was a very important part of the story for the last 1 year and will continue to do so over the next few years.
Yeah, I also thought that, that earlier the brands were spending a lot of money on hiring influencers to drive their brand. And now, was there an opportunity for them to involve their consumers to actually create the content and become influencers themselves, and not just really save the marketing money, but also build a deeper engagement with those consumers.
Exactly.
Them,
I don't know whether it's so much about saving the marketing money, but I think this will be on 3 levels, right? I think there are sometimes you just want to make a big message, create a large impact. You want to use an ambassador or a face who, is helping you to get that reach and is standing for it. Then, there are others who are experts. And then there are consumers. I think it's a blend, how you actually blend that strategy with whatever objectives you really have. I think that's important. I don't think one gives way for the other, though we would have loved to save the money. But I think there is a role for the bigger influencers and it's important to use them the right way. And I think there's a lot of technology which today helps you to, in fact, analyze the followers also, right? Because it has been a blind spot. Somebody has 5 million followers, but you really don't know. And then when you see the comments below the influencer, you wonder what it has to do with the brand that you are trying to actually promote through that influencer or a celebrity. But today technology helps you to analyze that, right? And therefore you can actually put your investments in the correct place. But it's also very important to put the right message in the right place, right? So I think there is a role that every kind of an ambassador can play. It's very important that you use, of course, and leverage your consumer relationships in the right way. I think that's also very important, right? So it's not just about the testimonials alone, but I think making consumers feel that they are respected and, that their opinion is valued or their needs were recognized. I think how you do it also matters.
Yeah. So I don't know whether we still have James. James, are you there? I thought.
James,
yes. No, it's fascinating.
So what is your view, James, on this, on consumers? In your case, where you had a different model of engagement completely. How consumers, dictated the way they want to engage with your formats. Was it influential in your brands and your models or formats or not? Or you were just innovative from your side to build those formats, new formats?
From our point of view, it's listening to consumers. We do a lot of consumer research, but a long time ago we thought about influencers, but for some reason we're skeptical of influencers because I think what Uma was saying is that they may have millions of followers, but who are these followers? And some of these influencers, they have good parts and they have not so good parts. And with this sort of celebrity world that we live in, we'd prefer to work with real people with real credentials, our customers. And the other people always a bit of a froth on the top. And we've stayed away from them because they can be very expensive, we find. So I suppose really what we've done is we've stripped back to the basics almost of what our customers want and adapted our product as much as we possibly can to fulfill their needs. Like Rajiv was saying regarding products for home for looking after yourself rather than wanting to look like Johnny Depp or somebody, which makes good sense. So yeah, we spent time but really working with customers rather than anything else. And this is one of the things I learned when most of my career I have been in retailing, but in the last 15 years I moved more into entertainment. And retailers, I always find, say they listen to their customers, but when I look at how the entertainment industry operates, it actually spends more time actually speaking to customers than retailers do. It's very interesting.
So Rajiv, you said in your, again coming back to you from, sorry. Ajay.
No, oh sorry.
Sorry, Ajay.
No, I was going back to Rajiv saying that, since again coming back to you because you're a high touch category, what are the kind of interesting things you did to one is not just to stay connected with your consumers, but also ensuring that their needs of personal well-being was taken care of. And I remember that, towards the middle of the pandemic, sometime in September, October last year, that's when people sitting at home started worrying about their, how they look and at least. So how did things change, and what if you can give us some examples of some very different things which you adopted or you delivered?
Yeah, no. So actually, I mean, from the prism of being a physical retailer, we actually saw that if the business is looked at from the angle of being a digital business with physical presence, is something that was playing strongly on our mind, because this kind of disruption in all our collective experience, I don't think we have actually seen. In fact, we used to worry about a couple of days of business shutdowns in the previous era. But over the last 1 year, we have realized that businesses could be disrupted for 3 months, 6 months, and maybe sometimes for longer periods. So I think the big thing that we were thinking of was how to take our business from a physical manifestation to a more digital method. So we actually started looking and exploring for collaborations, and where better to look for collaborations than to the startup ecosystem in India. So we actually started talking to all the major startups in the healthcare segment. To talk about the founders of Practo to 1mg to CultFit to everybody else put together. So a couple of good ideas came at that time. Like we started doing web consultations in a very big way. So we actually started working with the likes of MFine, where we actually said the fact that if we can't get the customers to the clinic, can we get the clinic to the customer? So at least, if not for making money, at least getting our brand across to multiple cities. We reached almost 200 cities through web consultations during that period of maybe May, June to maybe September, October, through that one method. We also started saying that can we collaborate with some of them. So today our services and products are available on CultFit in almost 6 cities, which we said the fact that rather than trying to, in this difficult environment, to get consumers in through advertising, could we get into places where people are looking for physical well-being and health? And now today we have a collaboration with them where their consumers I can avail of skin and hair services exclusively from Kaya in at least about 6 cities right now that we actually went in for. As I mentioned, we did a lot of customer contact programs, and we did a lot of meet the experts over online. So for example, with our doctors, we curated quite a bit of content on skin and hair concerns, and we put it out there. Obviously, there were no direct results in terms of numbers that could have come at that time, but I think in the long term, it will help the brand in a big way, because I think somewhere the concept of, one thing that is heightened in all of us during this period is the concept of empathy. We started looking at people who are probably unknowns to us also with a sense of empathy, which we probably didn't do in the past. So I think giving and doing good, I think, was extremely crucial for brands like us. We did our bit on making sure that sanitizers could be provided to people who are health workers, to police stations and stuff like that. So we did a bit of that as well during this particular period. So I would say not all of what we did during that period was aimed at drawing more business, but creating a longer lasting imprint of the brand in the mind of the consumer. I think that was something which is there. And from a pure business perspective, we decided how to go more digital. So we are revamping our entire D2C strategy. So we are coming up with a complete new D2C model, which provides customer with a solutions approach with products, services, and content. So that's going to launch very, very soon. I think those are the broad themes that we kind of adopted over the last 1 year, which is there.
So before I come to you, Uma, on I know I have something to ask you specifically. I want to ask James that, in between, I remember you were trying to do something at the metro stations in London. What was that?
Yeah. It's very exciting. We were approached by Network Rail, which is British Rail, and they have mainline stations in all the big cities in the United Kingdom. And their challenge was that inside these cities, they have many retailers and food and beverage outlets, but people had stopped going to the stations. And when they started going to the stations, they literally ran for the train to avoid contact with anybody or anything. And then as soon as the train arrived at the station, the door would open and people would almost run out of the station. So they spoke to us about creating activity within the stations to stop people from just running straight through the station. So we put together some fashion shows for King's Cross Station, and also we did something which seems quite obvious but never been done before. If you go to theme parks, there's things called skill games where you have a hoop and you throw it over a duck's head and you get a prize, or you kick a football for a hoop and you win a big bear for your children, type of thing. So we put some skill games into King's Cross Station, which is in central London, together with operators. So it created fun and excitement, which stops people from moving straight through the station. And then, of course, once you stop people, the dwell time increases, which meant they started to look around at the retailers and the coffee shops that were there. So that's worked out very well. And we've now been asked to look at other British Rail stations. The challenge with that project was and is there's so many people involved in Network Rail to get approval. It was quite a long process. And I think that where we've enjoyed the biggest successes has been where the old traditional way of approving things has been made much simpler, so you can move much faster, become more agile. But it's an exciting project. We'll be back there at Christmas time with some more skill games and probably some more pop-up retail as well.
So Uma, coming to you, what I had in mind was, since you're very familiar with technology, you have really worked directly with technology in various digital areas. What do you think, what are the kind of opportunities which are there for cross-brand collaboration with this new emerging? Like Rajiv mentioned that they are working with Corporate, they are working with various other, Practos and other people. So what has opened across lifestyle, working with healthcare, things like that. So what are the kind of opportunities and how technology will play a good role in that?
I think partnerships has been, and of course is a very big avenue for growth even now in the future. And like you said, technology can help. I think the biggest thing that we have seen which helps is that everybody now operates with APIs. So it's very easy to integrate across platforms. So whether you are looking at integrating, e-commerce channels, or whether you're integrating with platforms, which are service platforms, like Rajiv said, Practo, I think the beauty is that now everybody is operating with APIs and it's very easy to integrate, across the globe. I think the challenge really lies in cracking two aspects. I think one, of course, is cracking your own supply chain is very, very critical. So as a brand, whether you are prepared to serve a partnership like that, I think that is where I've seen failure points come very, very often, where you join a platform, but then you're not able to actually service that. And then there are two brands whose reputation actually come at stake, and there's a larger consumer base that gets affected. I think the second thing, which is easier solve now, is logistics. Even in pandemic, I think logistics is something which we've seen has scaled up, pretty significantly. And most retailers are still facing supply chain problems, but they're not facing those issues on the logistics side. And I've come across some very good platforms which allow you to actually set up shop, where they're taking care right up to payment and last mile, delivery. So I think it's very important that you prepare for partnerships of this nature, because there are many innovative partnerships. I still remember, though it was not even the pandemic, really at Raymond, we had launched entire white label with Raymond Made to Measure with Macy's in the US. So it's available as a brand called Taylor Square, launched over there, but a completely digital platform with digital ordering and digital visualization. But the entire piece was actually serviced from Bangalore, and you got a delivery within 2.5 weeks of a suit. Now, these kind of opportunities, which could be cross-category, they could be cross-boundary, right? And there is a lot of opportunity which the pandemic therefore has presented in terms of people want to explore different cultures, people want to explore different avenues, but you need to, I think, just make sure that internally one is geared up to do that, because otherwise it's quite possible to do it. And today for brands, it's very easy to go D2C. You don't necessarily have to start from a scratch platform. You can easily piggyback on other D2C collaborative platforms today, where you will get your own shop, right from whether it is your own store on Shopify, to have come across platforms which actually allow you to set up completely from scratch, whether you want to use influencers, whether you want to use your own UI, UX. I think there are too many possibilities which one could actually explore.
So there are some questions from the audience. Before I come to that, I have two questions, one from James and one from Rajiv. James, what has been your experience on using technology for these new initiatives which you have had, and do you think what is the importance? Before I go to Rajiv.
It's been very exciting for us, because a year or two ago we talked about there's a big observation wheel opening in Dubai called 𝐵 Dubai. It's the world's largest observation wheel. It's twice the size of the London Eye. And I put together a proposal to Maras, who's the entertainment arm of the Dubai government, to make it cashless. And I never succeeded. People said it would never, ever work. You have to be able to accept cash. But now every project that I'm working on is cashless, which I think is very interesting and exciting for all the obvious advantages. And on top of that, if you go to one of our block concepts, you purchase your food using an app, your drink using an app, and some retail using an app. And you pay for it on the app, which is cashless, but also you have the opportunity to comment on what you feel your customer experience is. So at the end of each day, you have the revenue you've created, plus a whole list of consumer guest feedback. So it's a fantastic way of monitoring the business and constantly striving for improvement, and done in a very easy, cost-effective, simple way, which is we do it as good fun. We reward people on a daily basis, and areas which we don't meet consumers' expectations, we can improve instantly rather than waiting 4 weeks, for example. It's very instant. It's exciting.
Thanks. So Rajiv, my question was, you mentioned that you reached out to a lot of startups on listening to how they can. I would really interesting to know for the 100 Watts followers to what kind of startups you think have opportunity to work with brands during this time.
Yeah. So I'll give you a couple of examples. I think all of us are starting a D2C journey in a big way over the next few years. And we know for a fact that it is not a very simple journey because I think the competition out there are fairly agile, fairly young tech startups, internet first companies. And obviously we start with a little bit of a disadvantage on the entire talent piece, which is there in-house in the organization to be able to think like that. For example, having fantastic product managers, great engineers, great performance marketers, growth hackers, all of these guys don't exist technically in most of the retail companies. Of course, the larger groups would have invested over the last couple of years, but I think it's a lot of this kind of tech resourcing is actually needed. So while in the next 1 or 2 years, we are trying to build some of this resource in-house, a lot of the startups that we can see today already bring in some of these skill sets that we can collaborate with. So for example, optimization on an online platform. For example, Amazon itself, there are at least 20, 30 examples I can think of companies which are helping companies to optimize on AMS. Is something that is there. Data analytics and AI is something that also is something that is, just to give you a small example, I'm working with a company with, I don't think, more than 5 people who are sitting and working with us on a face assessment tool, which can actually help doctors using the almost 10 years worth of facial data that we have today in our system, and actually do a predictive analytics on what can happen after our services are given. So already we are piloting with about 10 doctors using an application, which is actually using basic photography to actually give predictive outcomes to consumers. So that's another area that we are talking about. All of the consumer CRM databases that we actually have created, I think we need to go more deeper in terms of analytics for that. So persona building and stuff like that. So all this needs quality input and a very different type of organization structure. And I think if we don't have it in-house, I think we can definitely collaborate with third parties to be able to build that kind of stuff. And there is an absolute fertile ground and a lot of great companies coming out there, small companies with maybe 20, 30 people who are doing a fantastic job of it all around the country. So I think retail really needs that help. And there are a lot of people out there to help us right now.
Uma, your views on this?
I think it really depends on, your own strategy and what you want to achieve. So if you are looking at, and I can understand in the services business, innovation and analytics coming together is a very big area which will actually help drive value for your consumers, value for the practitioners, value for everybody who's involved, right? So I think there outsourcing makes tremendous sense because you want the agility, you want the speed, you also want the outside in perspective on technology, which you will use, but you have in-house intelligence, which is what your doctors in case of 𝐂𝐮𝐬𝐭𝐨, I'm sure, would be bringing forward, and there is a blend. But let's say now, if you were to say that you're setting up your own D2C on e-commerce, right, and you know that you want to actually scale that up for growth, there only that much, there's a limited amount that an external outsourcing and that can actually take you. So it's okay for foundation setting, maybe when you're still learning the ropes. But once you learn, you really want to actually drive that engine really, really fast because the engine is there. And it's not something that you will change every day, right? You don't want to change your platform every day. You just want your engineers to understand it inside out. You want your marketers to understand what is possible to do with that and then customize it, to your needs and run with it. There, I think an outsourcing model might, at some point reach a limiting factor. But it's very important that, I think it's the big thing that everybody battles with this, in especially I think in retail is investment, right? Because your tech investment suddenly looks, much larger as a foundation than the actual scale that you can see. So I think having a clear business model, having a clear, resourcing plan in terms of how you want to deliver, your results. And the third, I think, is very critical, that what is the measurement of success, right? Because in this online space, there are just so many ways to look at measures of success, right? Some people purely look at turnover as a measure of success because they think that, building that scale is also building that customer franchise. Others may think of profitability as a very big measure of success because they think that you're doing in the business and, there's no point in actually breaking even forget about actually, incurring loss, which many of the onlines do. I think when it comes to a blend of brick and mortar and online, there's a beautiful opportunity in terms of how you marry the two, how you measure it also together, because at the end of the day, you're in the business of serving consumers collectively and, you are operating multiple channels. So I think there are opportunities there where, you can actually cross-leverage the investment, you can cross-leverage the technology, you can cross-leverage the team, right, to be seamless across the organization. One size will not fit all, obviously. But I think the beauty of it is the amount of variation that you can have in the online models is also very good. And you can use it to your advantage.
There is a question from the audience. Is about how brands are actually taking consumer feedback seriously. And that goes in with what I've been thinking. Do you think, keeping this in mind, that the model of loyalty models and the so-called reward programs will change the face of that and the formats of that? Because seriously speaking, I feel that, a lot of brands don't really hear the voice of consumers at all, though they call them loyalty members and so-called part of the VIP club, whatever you call it. I mean, to all of you, what is your view on this? Because loyalty has become a hygiene factor rather than a real brand USP these days.
Yeah.
Rajiv?
Yeah, so I agree with you completely. I think our traditional model of loyalty is actually getting disrupted. And I think the online players in some sense have taught us a little different ways of saying the fact that if you were talking about an X to 10X growth, it is possible to do. Even in a market economy like this, we have seen product launches which have actually gone almost 10X growth in 4 to 5 years time, wherein actually as traditional companies, we are limited by the fact that we are saying limited consumers accounting for 90%, 100% of the turnover of the business. That will not work. You have to find ways and means to increase your base of consumers. And once you build the base of consumers, to increase the lifetime value of those customers. Don't expect any customer to be 100% brand loyal to you, because I don't think those customers exist. But at the same time, whatever time duration they connect with you, are you able to give a great experience? Is there a good word? Is there an amplification of that through some sort of communication by that customers to friends and peers for them to actually more customers? So I think this points-based loyalty programs and other things will have to replace with some experience-based systems. While things like we in retail terms, discounting and others are really looked down upon a bit. I think we have realized the fact that sometimes cleverly done, you can acquire a lot of customers using discounts through various channels. For example, we do some work with Cred, we do some work with MyGate, and a few other people that we are proposing to work with now. Now that builds in a large lead funnel, and I don't think in retail sometimes we look at it like a lead funnel type of an operation to say the fact that so many customers have come in and finally come through the door because of the massive outreach that we have done with multiple people. Because with some of these startups, some of these beautiful D2C examples that I've seen, that they have been able to get to millions of customers much faster than the traditional route of loyalty that some of us have been practicing. And that's why the customer base remains static for a long period of time, which I think has to be broken. I think the D2C model has to reach out to a lot more people. And to some extent, you need to have clever digital marketing play to be able to increase your lead funnel size. Just to give an example, whether you like it or not, during the pandemic, it was impossible for loyal customers also to come to your place. Right. So at that time, if you don't get a reasonable funnel of new customers, your business will be almost impractical to do. So I think to that extent, that is which is this. So I think experience-based, engagement-based, customer lifetime value would be important. Then also creating personas. I know these are all cliches of today, but I'm saying a persona building is important, because if you need to find out who is the likely audience for your type of brand and how many of them are out there in the universe, and be able to go down and use effective digital marketing to cohorts and stuff like that. But I think these are learnings for us coming from a physical world, but I think digital world has taught us quite a few good things in this area.
No, I remember I'm a big fan of a fashion brand, and when they unfortunately have their stores in my city only in malls, and all their stores were shut. And when I started getting messages from them that if you want anything, call us at this number.
Yeah.
And they were able to provide me anything I wanted through video shopping, WhatsApp shopping, and I never stopped buying from them.
Wonderful.
Because they were not available to me. So I thought that was a real service to a loyalty member.
Yeah.
And they were not talking discounts. They were not talking about special pricing.
Yeah.
And I thought that was wonderful. I think those are the kind of initiatives which I feel that the new model of engagements are required, where we feel really important to that we still have a genuine respect for the brand rather than just getting discounts and higher points. James, did you see any opportunity to work with the lifestyle brands or other brands where they can leverage your services or your formats to get a deeper engagement with their brands?
It's an interesting question, because in the Middle East, we've had a couple of shopping malls reach out to us for looking at bringing in entertainment into the shopping mall. And we're looking at, for example, theatre shows, cinema, and also indeed theme park rides, including we can create an indoor roller coaster, which is movable. So we could put a roller coaster into a shopping mall, and then 3 months later we could take it out and put in something else. So you're giving people reasons to come to shopping centre, the shopping mall, but also to come back again. And there seems to be quite a trend where families want to do things together. So you could all go to a shopping mall, which you could, of course, say, if it's run correctly, would be a safe environment for a family to be in. And therefore, the parents can enjoy some shopping and the children can enjoy some theme park rides or other such entertainment. So most definitely. The other interesting thing we've seen is, the other interesting thing we've seen is, say, for example, somebody has a football stadium, a Premiership football stadium, as we're working on one in London at the moment, then it's, well, what else can you use the stadium for? Because the stadium typically is used once every 2 weeks for a football game, or twice every 2 weeks. So you've got a huge arena that's empty. So we're now looking at doing film launches and even some theatre shows within football stadiums. So I think people are looking at the asset they've got and how can they use the asset more. If that makes sense.
Thank you for your inputs. Now, finally, before we say bye to everybody, I wanted all of you to give 1 minute. What is the kind of message you would like to give to the emerging startups, especially on technology side for retail? Uma?
I would say that I think there are 2 points that I would say. One is, of course, the startup, world is really more initially about the idea. And I think that, I find that many startups, they come up with a brilliant idea and then they struggle with the operationalization of that idea. So I would say that stick to it. I have a belief in that idea, but make sure that you're able to actually put it into reality, into practice, and stick to the genesis of the idea. Sometimes I find the idea gets a little dispersed in time to operationalize it. So I would say stick to that. The second thing, and it also goes back to what you said about loyalty, Ajay and Rajiv also spoke about it. I think whether you have a loyalty program or not, it's important to have a customer set. And I think we're moving towards a cookieless world very soon. So the power of first-party data is very important. And you will find that, brands like Shoppers Stop or brands like Kaya over here have built that franchise right from the start when they have launched, right? And I think looking at that from the lens of one, of course, saying that you build those relationships right from the start is also very important, because in the startup world, we may tend to look at it as a database, whereas the loyalty program helps us to think of it as a relationship. So it's not about the points. Make sure you have a robust database and, make sure that you're prepared for this cookieless world, because, a lot of the startups, especially D2C, are going to face that in the future, and it's going to be a marketing challenge. Second is build those relationships from the start, right? Because, in that whole, trying to actually set it up, trying to operationalize it, one forgets that customer relationships, even in the D2C, B2C space, become very, very important. So build those from the start. I would say these 2 things.
Thanks, Rajiv.
Yeah, no, I think my message is simple, that I think there are a lot of problems to be solved in the traditional retail becoming morphing into the to the digital world. And we don't have all the answers. Typically, traditional, unfortunately, the word traditional means there's a lot of legacy type of organizations that we have built over time, and we are all trying to change as we see the digital revolution that is happening. Everybody's trying to embrace internet, e-commerce, and digital. There is a lot of opportunity for companies to really find out these pain points and work with retailers. And there is a large opportunity out there. I would say to the tune of a few $1 billion sitting out there for people to work with physical retailers to say the fact that how do you help them move into this digital online journey. And if you have to say really omnichannel is scratching the surface, maybe not even 1 or 2% of the total business. But tomorrow, if indeed 25, 30, 40% of the business were to move to omnichannel, there's a large opportunity for tech entrepreneurs, internet first companies to work with physical retailers. I think they just have to keep an open mind to the fact that while speed, agility, other things may have been compromised in physical retail, but everybody is out there to get there fast. So I think if there is a meeting of minds, there are a lot of opportunities sitting out there. I think James also mentioned some great ideas of saying the fact, how do you monetize your assets? How do you create things very differently? In fact, I was reading one of the books maybe almost a few years ago as to how retail businesses can become virtually experience centers, right? Like typically places like Shopper Stop, where you're talking about 40, 50, 60,000 square feet, 100,000 square feet. How do you build experiences and engagement there? And could some of these startup companies come into this play and build those kind of ecosystems for all of us?
James?
I think what startups can do is provide value for people. So have a big presence online, not charging, but free advice, helping wherever they can with their consumers, building a brand, but dare I say, not charging for it. I think I've listened to what Uma and Rajiv have said. I think now is the time for people to build their brand through loyalty, through offering value, and indeed, in many cases, kindness to the consumer, because it doesn't go unnoticed. And I think people are spending so much time now on their phones, on their laptops, that if you can provide content for free, I don't like using the word free, but now I use it a lot, you're providing value for people, which will endear people to your brand and create loyalty.
Yeah,
I've been looking at that quite a lot over the last few weeks. I've been looking at the big people that have got lots of subscribers on YouTube, and a lot of these YouTube folk, they give an enormous amount of content to people, and that creates a huge following and loyalty towards them.
sure.
Thank you very much. I think we are run out of time now, and thank you very much. Before we close, I want to tell everybody that we have our next masterclass workshop on 25th of this month, which is on product management and marketing, followed by our next Talk Retail on 9th of October, which is about supply chain challenges post-pandemic. And thank you once again. Join our next session. And thanks, Uma, thank you, Rajiv, and thanks, James, for taking out your time.
Thank you, Ajay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Bye.
Take care. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.